All right, so here we are again, Bill Kutik and a year later we do our annual call. Bill's still got his ancient IBM laptop that he's using to record this conversation through Skype. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Made in China by Lenovo, but with the IBM logo on it. So it is old.
How old is it? I mean, this is the real world we're talking about.
I really hate to even imagine, but it's running Windows XP, okay. So you can just extrapolate from that.
I wrote a blog post about 9 months ago, I think, about the real sort of state of enterprise technology and how that's the standard setup in a company, an old laptop with a Windows XP. You know, we're talking about all this shiny new stuff, but that's the reality in a lot of companies.
Right.
So, Bill, what do you think is top of mind for HR professionals this season as we get into the busy fall budgeting season?
Exactly. I really do believe that finally SaaS, software as a service, now unfortunately expressed as the cloud in order to attract attention on Wall Street, has become top of mind among HR people. Part of that, of course, has to do with the phenomenal success of Workday, but it also has to do with the fact that, Oracle has come out with a SaaS suite called Fusion, and they have HCM as well as all the traditional ERP applications in it. Mm-hmm. And HR people are really looking at it hard for the very first time. And one of the examples of that is at the HR Technology Conference, our signature event is a panel run by Naomi Lee Bloom called Bringing HR into the Cloud. And it includes, it's a vendor panel, which normally I don't like very much, but it includes, the #2 product guy from Oracle, Steve Miranda, the president of Global Solutions for SAP, people like that on down.
You got John Wookie on there from Salesforce.
And we've got John Wookie on there from Salesforce, who's going to try to reinvent at least the talent management part of HR as a social function. So I really do think that is their top of mind. And,
but what about the actual HR professional? I mean, I agree. I completely agree. Software as a service is definitely top of mind, but system of record is so kind of conservative, and people go to prison if you get it wrong, and so on.
Yes, I do.
It's a big shift. I mean, there's a lot riding on this, and clearly we're moving in that direction. What? I mean, you spend far more time than most of us delving into the minds of people in the HR profession. What's your sense about kind of, is there a sort of gestalt right now, or is that too broad of a question?
Yeah, no, there very much is. And even though the term talent management calls up the vision of software, the fact is, to the HR person's point of view, the notion of identifying good players and finding them the right work and keeping them engaged and aligning them with the goals of the organization, that's what it's all about for them. And yeah, you can do that without the technology tools, but it's a hell of a lot easier to do it with them. But I think that's absolutely top of mind, in addition to what we know well, which is, despite 25 million unemployed and underemployed, that there are huge shortages in certain areas where the war for talent is raging as hard as it did in the .com era for software engineers in Silicon Valley. And this is much on their mind, how they're going to find these people.
Yeah. So I remember you saying a year or so ago that there's an awful lot of talk about collaboration in the HR world, but very little doing. That's clearly changed. But do you think it's actually real, to pick up on your last point, real in the flow of work, using these new technologies to be more efficient and more effective, or do you think there's lip service and people are still working broadly offline and in a sort of a paper-driven culture?
Right. I think there are good examples of companies doing work collaboratively, and the most astonishing example to me is Marsh & McLennan, which is the largest insurance brokerage in the world, the most conservative industry vertical you can imagine, who are doing it. And, their head, their CHRO and their VP of HR are going to be speaking at the show and explaining how they did it. And, when I was writing it up, I basically said, if an insurance company can do it, what's your excuse?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, because I've been surprised by very conservative companies how you would think that very conservative companies would not move at all with collaboration strategy, but in fact I've done a couple of really large ones last year with very conservative financial services companies who are surprisingly willing to sort of engage and really think through how to do this stuff more efficiently.
Right.
It's not always what it appears, you know.
Yeah, it's amazing, and yet at the same time, I still reject the Judy Garland, Andy Rooney notion of let's do a show that if employees publish their goals publicly within a company, others will rush to help them meet their goals.
Right.
I mean, the unfortunate thing here is I haven't had a corporate job in 22 years. I've been self-employed. The last time I had a corporate job, people would usually sort of try to stab you in the back to avoid you reaching your goals rather than jump in to help. And maybe the workplace has changed.
I mean, I could talk for an hour on that. I mean, there's a couple of cliches. Knowledge is power. People are, if the company's set up for people to compete from an HR perspective, like a lot of the large Asian electronics companies deliberately set, almost literally hire two employees to compete with each other internally. That kind of thinking is very different to some of the more mellow companies where it would be okay to publish your goals and have people work collectively and collaboratively.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, good. So, Karen.
All I was going to agree with you and generalize and say it's a huge part of corporate culture. Yeah. And, traditionally in America, you've been judged on how many people report to you, how big is your budget, and what do you know that no one else knows.
And how big is your office?
Yeah.
Yeah, the old carpet tiles joke. How many carpet tiles have you got in your office? Yeah. So HR Tech Show coming up. Well, let's hit the high points on that. The date.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's coming up in about 7 weeks from when we're talking now. October 8th through 10 at the West Wing of McCormick Place in Chicago. Our website is HR Technology Conference, all one word, .com. It looks like we're going to have another record year. Last year in Vegas, attendance was up 30% against the previous year. We are running ahead of Las Vegas, at least as of last Friday. Yeah. Last year, we had attendees from 27 countries, including 8 from South Korea. And I have no idea how they found out about us, but they were there representing 4 countries, 4 organizations, as well as 7 people from Brazil. All the BRIC countries, of course, were there in force. People tend to forget that the U.S. excels really only in 2 things anymore. We used to build the best cars in the world and have the best steel. Now we have the best entertainment, movies, television, music, and we do the best software. We are the world's leader in software.
Along with the Canadians.
Along with Canadians do well, too.
Yeah.
And so when people are interested in HR software, they don't go to a show in Amsterdam necessarily to see the few American vendors who show up there. Yeah. They come to HR Technology. And, the vendors know that, too. Last year we had 220, which was a record. Last Friday, who knows what date that is when this runs, we had 237 already, and we were going to sell out the show floor for the first time. So it is this I like to think of it as Brigadoon, if you know that old Hollywood musical, where it just appears magically once a year, and 4,600 people, if you count everyone except the janitors, if you count all the vendor reps, and I do count them because, we're international small town and people sell things.
So let's hit that point. Final point here. It's a global economy, right? I mean, most of the strategy I've been doing is very much global. You don't sweat the small stuff, and you can get America culturally is pretty unique, but the reality is for HR, a lot of the big headaches are global, aren't they? I mean, you're basically talking about distributed parts of enterprises and. Let's just hit that point because you're really running a global show at this point.
Absolutely, and it is appropriate given what you just said. We have the SVP of McAfee, right? The virus software.
Yeah.
And they're not a big company, right? They're a small single product, well, two product. They're owned by someone else now, but they operate independently.
Yeah.
They're not a big company, 2,000 to 3,000 people. They operate in 185 countries around the world.
Right.
And I make the point that I'm a one-man company, and I've done work in 6 countries in the last 2 years. So indeed, everything is global now.
Yeah.
And even the smallest companies have global challenges. And in HR, where things aren't even standardized in the U.S. And people do things so differently from city to city and state to state, that's bad enough. But then you go from country to country where they don't even do the addresses the same way. I mean, I well remember 10 years ago when you could not enter a Canadian address into an American HR system because it just would not allow for the province and the weird place that the postal code was. Forget about a Spanish name that had 6 names, right? Global is on everybody's mind, and Karen Beeman of Jetosa Group has been running a global panel for us for years. She's about the expert in HR about global issues, and she'll be doing that again with people who are suffering and occasionally meeting and very occasionally triumphing over global problems. Yeah,
good. Final thought on the economy, because that's the other, we're in a very serious economic situation globally as opposed to locally. Any thoughts on that and its impact on HR?
Well, that's an excellent point that you made, globally and not locally. I mean, the fact is, and let me take a narrow viewpoint here for the moment, most American corporations are back to where they were before the recession in 2007. Their earnings are back. They're sitting on enormous wads of cash, part of it collected by employing 10% fewer people than they employed in 2007. And they're spending this money on capital equipment and on IT. And I have no illusions that the reason we've done so well the last few years is because they've been spending it on IT and specifically on HR. But that is indeed a national thing. And that at any moment, some horrible global situation could collapse, and the confidence with which American companies have been spending their wads of cash, their mountains of cash in some cases, will stop. And suddenly they're not going to be spending it like that anymore. And I frankly don't have any idea what will happen then.
Right. Specific to HR, I mean, do you think HR...
Specific to HR, I mean, they've been spending it now because the 50-year-old lie printed in large type in corporate annual reports. You've seen it, I've seen it. People are our most important assets. For 50 years, companies said that, and they were lying. They considered their workforce fungible, completely replaceable. Nobody was too important to fire. Well, now they sort of believe it. And they're seeing the competitiveness that comes not from great technology, not from incredibly sharp financial maneuvering. They're seeing it coming from their workforce and the abilities of the workforce being the essential competitive block. So I think that's the reason why you're seeing so much money being spent on HRIT and why it will continue for the nonce. I mean, I don't know when they've had enough. But as I said, if something globally bad happens, I'm sure everyone will pull themselves into their shell.
Yeah, no, good point. All right, good stuff. We better stop there, otherwise we'll be making the complete Hollywood film. But that's great. Good to see you. And I'll see you at your conference in a few weeks. Look forward to it.
Good. I look forward to it. You're going to be on the panel with some people who are supposedly working collaboratively. Yeah. And you can properly ask them, how much it's true and how much it isn't. Yeah. And I'll be curious to find out.
All right.
So see you there.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Bye.